I'm Tanya Eiserer. I'm an investigative reporter here at Channel 8. I'm joined today with Meredith Bagui. She's a longtime defense attorney, served 12 years in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. And why is it? Sorry, guys. My laptop is muted.
Mine's muted.
All right, I'm not sure how to fix that. So we're playing. I'm going to shut it. Let's try that. So Meredith, shut yours too.
Okay.
Sorry, we're figuring out the technical glitches of, see, now that seemed to do it, shutting our laptops. I don't know why it was doing that. But anyway, so that's part of what we're dealing with right now is we're getting used to some of the technical difficulties of doing this a different way. COVID has changed many things. In prior trials, my guest sat beside me, but right now my guest is downstairs in one of our studios, and so we're separated, obviously due to COVID restrictions. But anyway, so this is day 2 of the Billy Chemirmir trial. I am joined by Meredith Bagui, longtime defense attorney, served 12 years in the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, and she also has prosecuted child abuse cases. So just a lot of experience, and we're very thankful to have her with us today. So just to start off, we're going to replay a story that my colleague Rebecca Lopez, who's in the courtroom, did that will recap yesterday's events. And so let's take a listen.
Billy Chemirmir sat in court in a suit taking notes through the first day of testimony.
This is a case about stalking, smothering, and stealing.
He stands accused in the deaths of at least 18 elderly women. The prosecution said Chemirmir smothered his victims, then stole their jewelry.
He just smashed a pillow down hard over my face and my chest.
They played the taped deposition of one surviving victim, Mary Bartel, who has since passed away. Her recall of the horrific moment stood out Monday.
Number 1, I should not have opened the door. Number 2, my life was in grave danger.
It is her account of the 2018 attack that led detectives to Lou Harris's body, another victim, and a cascade of other death cases at independent living homes.
It's what's haunted us, the thought that our moms probably thought the same thing of why did I open this door to this man.
This trial is for the murder of Lou Harris. 11 of the 18 victims' families watched in solidarity in an overflow room at the courthouse.
We regret that we aren't able to see the jury and that the jury isn't able to see us.
The prosecution is laying the groundwork that stalking, smothering, and stealing were Billy Chemirmir's MO. The defense is arguing this is all circumstantial. Tuesday will mark a long day of testimony, another long day for these victims' families, and even for the men accused of it all.
Meredith, you watched the testimony yesterday. What struck you the most about what you saw?
I think the deposition testimony of Ms. Bartel was really good for the prosecution. She was able to describe in vivid detail, this horrible attack on her person, and really brought it to life for us, which is something that in a murder trial you rarely have because that person is dead and can't give their side of the story. So I think that was really smart of the prosecution to take that deposition and to play it for the jury. Really made it very scary and real for them.
What things did she say that just really hit home with you?
I thought it was very interesting that when she said she opened the door, that she fixated on those green gloves that he had, and she immediately knew that meant something terrible was going to happen to her. And that makes sense in a lot of cases where there's like a gun involved. For instance, we call it tunnel vision, where people stare at that gun and all they can see is the gun. In this case, it was the gloves for her. It made such an impression. And then also hearing her testify about how he put that pillow over her head, this pillow that she's laid on every night to go to sleep, and never imagined this pillow, would be used to try to kill her. That he shoved it forcefully on top of her, and that she was, you could really visualize what was going on. She was such a good descriptor of what happened, and I thought that was really, really scary.
I don't know about you, but if I'm at 91 and I'm as lucid as she was, I would really want to be, because you could tell she really still had all of her wits about her.
Completely.
And even her description of trying to set off the alarm.
Yeah. She was very, very clearly able to describe, and I think that's something in cases with the elderly, sometimes they're not able to clearly remember things, and that benefits their attackers because, at first she said, I thought it was a dream. So then you're thinking, oh no, is she able to distinguish fact from reality? But she certainly was able to do that. There's no question.
What did you think about the decision of prosecutors to take this from a very chronological approach? I mean, they're really taking us from, A, and it feels like we're going all the way to Z.
Yes, that's a very common approach. You can do, there's a deliberate choice on the part of the prosecutor, and I know Glenn Fitzmartin very well. He's a very good prosecutor, and there is a deliberate choice on the part of the prosecution to try to paint a picture, and you can do it chronologically, or you can also, you can split it up and do it non-chronologically if you want to, and throw the jury in the middle of the action. And I think that this just lends itself to a chronological telling, that this is the best way to tell this story, is these people were brutally attacked. Then they found someone who had property that matched, and then on to Miss Harris, if that's where we're going next. I think it makes perfect sense.
I know, because I was talking to Judge Conyers about this yesterday, and I know sometimes when I'm working on a story, I'll try to write it in a way that's non-chronological, and what'll happen is I'll end up ripping it up and putting it back chronological, because you have to walk people, in my case viewers, in their case jurors, step by step through what is happening and why it's happening, because otherwise you get lost in how did that really happen? What's the series of events here?
Right.
One thing the other thing that struck me was the testimony from the neighbor's son. I mean, to have the presence of mind to go, I need to record that license plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was very, very observant. I think that's something that, my grandmother used to actually live in these apartments. And we just kind of tend to look out for elderly people, and he was coming there to take care of his mother, I believe. And so, it's a tendency to want to make sure that, hey, why is this guy hanging out, and what's he doing around my mom's apartment? And yeah, he was a neighborhood hero. He was coming up and saying, that doesn't look right, and let me investigate. And I thought it was very, very good of him to go up there and actually talk to this person and say, hey, do you need something? Because, this man has every right to be here, but he doesn't know this other guy. And I couldn't believe that he had put himself in that situation so easily and quickly. And that really shows he's looking out for the residents of this community.
Well, and if he doesn't record this license plate, I don't know that you catch Chemirmir.
Right. So he really is the hero of the story.
Because it sets in motion this string of events. Because Mary Bartel, she cannot identify her attacker.
Right.
Now, do you think the jury, because I don't think there's going to be, based on everything I know, there's not going to be that witness that comes in and says, I saw Billy Chemirmir do X, Y, Z. I saw him, smother this woman. Do you think that it's going to be difficult for the jury to deal with a circumstantial case?
No, I don't think it's going to be difficult. I think that the prosecution is doing a very good job of painting that picture and building that brick wall, brick by brick by brick. If there's enough circumstantial evidence, then you certainly can convict, and oftentimes we don't have the smoking gun, or we don't have somebody to come in and say, I saw this person shoot this person, or I saw this person smother this person. We rarely have that kind of evidence, and if we do, then usually it doesn't go to trial. That case is going to plead out. So I think a circumstantial case is more likely to end up in a trial, and juries are kind of used to it now with CSI and all these shows on TV that they like circumstantial evidence. When you say the word circumstantial, people give that a negative connotation, but then when we explain to them, DNA is circumstantial. It just, your DNA happens to be in a place, and then we are building a theory of what happened based on all the circumstantial evidence. And so sometimes circumstantial evidence is even better than a direct eyewitness evidence, because as we know, eyewitnesses sometimes can be wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I've covered those cases where they have been wrong. And I know as a young police reporter, I used to put a lot more stock in eyewitness testimony, and
Sure.
I don't do that today. I mean, it's unfortunate, but our memories are a faulty thing.
Right. We've come a long way in science in understanding the nature of eyewitness testimony, and I think that eyewitness testimony needs to be also corroborated by physical evidence when it can be, just to make sure.
And that's why they've changed the lineup procedures, and all kinds of stuff have changed over the years, as we all know.
Yeah.
So what did you make of the defense attorneys? I mean, they asked very few questions, and there were a couple of witnesses, a couple of the detectives towards the end of the day that they did not ask any questions of at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be a strategy in and of itself. I mean, if you certainly don't want to open up a line of questioning that will lead to something bad for your client. And we don't know what they know, and we don't know what's been kept out of the trial by pretrial rulings and hearings and such. So as a defense attorney, you're trying not to add any more bad evidence to your case. Like, what are you going to say? Sometimes it's like, what else could I add to this that hasn't already been said? And I don't think anything's come up so far where they could actually attack any of the evidence that the state has put forth right now.
It's kind of a do no harm approach.
Yes, exactly. First, do no harm, right? Because you can ask a question and get an answer that you really didn't want to have.
Didn't want the answer.
Yeah.
Right, because it might open up a line of questioning that the judge has not allowed in.
Right.
And
yeah.
then
You don't know what.
Right, and once you open that barn door.
Yes, so you definitely don't want to open doors to things that you don't want to come in front of the jury. And also, sometimes there's just no questions to ask. It's a very cut and dry thing. Save your questions for the witnesses you want to really get into, like the experts who are going to do the science and the DNA and things that can be argued.
What do you think defense attorneys are going to have to do here?
It is a circumstantial case, so all they could, definitely can say is no one saw him do this. No one can come in here and say that he is the person that did this. We have property that was found with him. Certainly, it's very common knowledge, I think, now that when someone steals a piece of property, they don't usually go to the pawn shop and pawn it themselves, although that does happen. They fence it through another person, and then that person goes to sell it. So it's very common for that to happen. And so I think that in this case, you would definitely want to question the time period that the property has been out there for someone to possibly sell to Mr. Chemirmir. And I think that's the best strategy to go for, is that, hey, he just had the property. He didn't do this heinous crime. He's not that kind of person.
I think he's going to have they're going to have a heavy lift on that, because, let's see, Lou Harris, she's the victim, the case that's being tried right now. She is at that Walmart at 3:27 p.m. in the afternoon, and then they have surveillance video of him following her, or allegedly following her. They're there in the same store, and it appears that he's following her. And
Yes.
then he's arrested at 5:50 p.m. How do you, that's a pretty tight timeline to try to explain.
It is, and that's part of the state's burden, is to tighten that timeline as much as possible, and then the defense's job is to also bring in reasonable doubt. It could have been that he just handed it to Billy Chemirmir on the street and said, hey, can you, do you want this, or go sell this, or just dumped it in front of him and ran because he knew it was a bad idea. But at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to all the evidence, the timeline, what the jury believes is reasonable.
The DA's office originally had sought the death penalty in this case. And then they decided over the summer not to seek the death penalty. What's your thoughts on that decision, and why they would have made that decision?
Well, the death penalty is a very political decision, always made by the elected DA, ultimately. I believe now they have a committee in the office where they debate whether or not they're going to seek the death penalty. We reserve it obviously for our most heinous crimes, and I think that this would clearly be one of those crimes that would fit that category. But seeking the death penalty, you don't want to do it on a case where I don't want to say it's weak, but if it's a circumstantial case and you're concerned that you might not be able to win, then you don't want to add that pressure of, oh, and I also want you to kill him if we find him guilty. It's not necessary, and you only want to seek it on cases where you're 100% sure you're going to get it. I mean, no one can be 100% sure, but you're very, very confident that that's going to happen. And I think this one, just one, you don't want that added pressure because it is circumstantial. Two, it's a political decision, and Judge Cruzo understands that and knows that his constituents we're all kind of divided on that issue, and it's hard to judge society's feelings. But I think Dallas County's a little bit leaning towards, not having the death penalty as much.
Well, and it's almost like if you're not going to seek the death penalty in this case, then you almost have to say maybe is the death penalty really on the table anymore in Dallas County?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I haven't asked Judge Cruzo that exact question. I don't know that he would. I don't know that he would answer it.
Right.
But let's talk about this. This is a mini cap trial. That's kind of the nickname in criminal justice circles. Can you walk people through what a mini cap trial is?
So a mini cap is where if you win the criminal case, then it's automatically going to be a life sentence, and that just kind of forecloses off your punishment phase. The judge is going to give him a life sentence, and then that's it. So we just have to worry about, or the state is just concerned about, the guilt-innocence portion of the trial. And as we all know, there's 3 phases to a trial. There's jury selection, or voir dire. There's guilt-innocence, which is what we're in now. And then there is usually a punishment phase where the prosecution puts on any character and reputation evidence of the defendant that's bad, and also testimony from the victims or the victims' families about how the crime has affected them. So this just takes out that 3rd phase, and it's an automatic life sentence if he's convicted.
How much do you think we'll hear about other offenses in this case?
Well, we're already hearing about Miss Bartlett. So I'm sure
Bartel.
there's been Bartel. I'm sure there's been a ruling before trial as to how many victims they're allowed to bring in, what evidence they're bringing in. I didn't see a 404B notice, which is a notice the state has to give to the defense about what extraneous evidence they're going to put in on the case. So I don't know how much they're going to go into these other murders. But, they could put in all of them. They could put in none of them. It's just kind of up to what the judge rules and how they think that's going to affect the case.
Yeah, so they did in the prosecutor's opening statements, he brought up Mary Books, I think was her name.
Okay.
And basically said that this Richardson police detective, heard about the Chemirmir arrest. Hold on, wait a second.
Which is filed in the state of Texas versus Billy Chemirmir, and the offense is capital murder by terror or threat. And where we left off yesterday, the state was still presenting their case in chief. So, Mr. Fitzmartin, call your next witness, please.
Thank you. We'll call Detective Cazzelle.
Good morning.
help you guys?
I do.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Martin?
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name and spell your last name?
Stephen Cazzelle, Cazzelle.
And how are you employed?
I'm a sergeant with the Dallas Police Department.
And how long have you been with the Dallas Police?
Almost 15 years.
And tell me some of the roles that you've had in the Dallas Police Department.
Started out as a patrol officer, answering calls for service. From there, went into a surveillance team called Deployment. Worked major crimes unit, fugitive unit. Now supervise a covert deployment unit.
And tell me about that covert deployment unit. What does that entail?
We gather intelligence on known offenders, gang members, conduct surveillance. We try to on-view offenses and usually try to arrest people in the act of committing offenses.
And you're a supervisor of that unit?
Correct.
How many people are in your unit?
10.
Back on March 20th of 2018, were you in a similar unit?
I was.
Were you the supervisor of that unit?
I was not.
So since then, you've taken the sergeant's exam and passed that, and now you're a supervisor of the same.
Correct.
So back in March of 2018, tell me how many people were in that unit?
I believe there was 9 or 10 people in that unit.
And we had heard from a group of Plano detectives yesterday that were in a similar unit. So you have kind of an idea. On March 20th of 2018, did you all receive a call of some sort for service?
Correct, yes.
Tell me about that.
We were, at the beginning of our shift, we were contacted by Plano Police Department, asked for our assistance in conducting a welfare check at a residence.
What time do you recall what time your shift started?
Evening time, probably around 7 or 8 is when our start time shifted around a lot, but probably 7 or 8 p.m.
And that call for service, is that common to the type of work that you all might? A welfare check?
Not usually. That's more, usually goes to a patrol officer, but because of circumstances, they called and requested our assistance.
So the Plano Police Department told you about Mary Bartel, or they told the police command staff or something like that about what they had arrested Mr. Chemirmir. We already learned yesterday that they had arrested Mr. Chemirmir. They had developed this address from the information from him, and they relayed all that information to you?
Yes.
And so did you go to a certain location in Dallas?
We did.
And where was that?
I forget the name of the street, North Dallas address off of Arapahoe and Hillcrest area.
Okay, if you look to your left there, there's this 6609 Warm Breeze in that far North Dallas area. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And when you got there, what was the scene like?
Quiet neighborhood. House was locked, secured, no lights on.
Did you and you and your other team members, I would assume, arrived around the same time?
Correct.
And when you arrive at a location like this, you don't know what you're rolling in, do you?
No.
How are you dressed?
That particular day we were in uniform, which is not common for us, but we were in uniform that day.
You first do an external check of the house?
We do. Looked in the windows, knocked on the doors.
There's no sign of life?
Correct.
What was your next measure? What did you do?
We began speaking to neighbors, seeing if it was common for the resident to be home or awake at this hour.
At some point in time, did you learn of a family member living nearby?
We did.
And individual named Rick Reinhart?
Yes.
So what did you do once you got that information?
We, through a couple of database checks, we were able to find an address for him and phone number. Made a couple phone calls, not successful, and then we went to the house and knocked on the door.
Did he answer the door?
Correct.
And you learned some information about Ms. Harris from him?
Yes.
Based on the information that you had from Plano, based on the information that you got from Mr. Reinhart, did y'all make a decision on how to handle the situation in 66091?
We did.
And what was that?
To force entry into the house for a welfare check.
When you say force entry into the house, what does that entail?
Because the house was locked up, that we had to kick in the back door.
And when you make an entry like that, describe how y'all do that.
Usually, because we don't know exactly what we're going into, we treat them all the same. So it's we'll stack up on a door, force entry, and then we'll do a protective sweep of the residence.
So is this guns drawn?
Yes, it is.
And there's the front guy. What does he do?
Usually, the first guy is the one that slams the door, and then usually the second person is the first one to make entry.
And you know where you were on that stack?
Probably number 3 or 4.
And as you know, I think we might have all seen TV shows where you're going around the house yelling out clear and things like that, or is it similar to that?
Similar, pretty
Not dramatic.
maybe not as dramatic. Yes.
And so that you were you and your team able to do that?
We were.
And you checked all the rooms and closets and bathrooms and all.
Correct.
Was there anyone in the house alive?
No.
Were you able to find Miss Harris?
Yes.
And was she returned to what state was she in?
She was laying on the floor between a dresser and her bed and deceased.
Once that has been established that you have a deceased individual, what is the next step that you all would take in that as regards to death?
From our my unit's perspective, we then backed out and secured the residence, and then contacted the homicide unit.
The homicide unit.
Correct.
A specialized division of the Dallas Police Department that investigates these crimes.
Correct.
Were there representatives of the Plano Police Department there as well?
There were.
They didn't go inside the house.
Not that, to my knowledge, no.
You when you secure the area on the outside, when specialized investigators show up, do they make entry into the house? Some of them.
Yes, they did.
And is there information relayed from you to those other investigators and people that come in from the house?
Yes, there was.
Yes, sir,
You may.
Let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 279, and then State's Exhibits 157 to 188. I think you've had an opportunity to look at these, but if you just look over those and
Sure.
make sure that you're familiar with those pictures.
Not familiar.
Do these pictures fairly and accurately represent the house at 6609 Warm Breeze, the night you all were
They do.
walking in?
exhibits number 79, as well as 157 through 188 will be admitted.
The delivered 270.
270, did I say? Oh,
I'm sorry. I
So,
misspoke. I apologize.
that's okay. I think that was on me. It is exhibit 279, and exhibits 157 through 188 will be admitted.
Mr. Pope?
Yes.
Okay, Detective, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 279. Is this that house there at 6609 Warmbridge on the street?
Yes.
I'm just going to take a little trip around the house. Basically 157 that we're looking at here.
Yes.
What are we looking at the side of the house?
The side of the house, yes.
158, if we were to step back and look back up to where the camera was in 157, is that the other back side of the house?
Correct.
What are we seeing here, 159?
The garage and entry to the backyard.
160?
Side gate in the backyard.
161, there was a lock found in the ground of this. So someone came back later and took these pictures, right?
Yes.
Someone, you didn't take them.
Correct. No, I did not.
So someone sees a lock that's cut on the ground. What is that?
It's a lock that we removed to get into the backyard.
That's DVDs.
Yes.
At the time when you all were trying to make entries, there were no unlocked doors at all.
Everything was locked. Everything was locked. Yes.
162, what are we seeing here?
Looks like the inside of the gate.
So just if we were on the opposite side of where we were on the outside of the garage, was
Yes.
on the inside, on the backyard.
Correct.
163,
In the backyard, looking towards the rear doors of the house.
back inside this little patio area, we're going to walk up there in a minute and through these pictures. Is that where you make entries?
Yes, to the door on the left.
164.
Just backyard, looking still at the back of the house.
Now 165, are we walking up a little bit closer to that back patio area?
Yes.
166.
It's the door we made entry into.
So there's two doors. There's one to the left and one to the right. And y'all chose the one to the left.
Correct.
Did you have any rhyme or reason as to which door do you think, or you just chose the door?
They were both pretty covered. I think when we first looked, kind of maybe had a crack in the curtains or something. We decided that that was the less blocked doorway.
I mean, it looks like from the pictures that it's pretty hard to see inside this house.
It is.
167. That's your entry that you made. That slamming. What do y'all use to get in?
Various breaching tools. Usually it's a door slammer. It's designed to punch doors.
That 168. We see some of the effects of that on the ground.
Correct.
Okay, 169. I think the next several pictures are just kind of how y'all found the inside of the house, and just different various areas inside the house.
Correct.
It's safe to say there was a lot of things inside this house.
There were.
This is a 169. This is kind of like the dining room area with a lot of items.
Yes.
170. What are we looking at here?
It's a stack of model airplanes. I'm not sure which room this is in,
Okay.
but there was airplanes everywhere.
171.
Looks like another bedroom.
172. We're looking kind of into the living area.
Yes.
In towards the kitchen.
We are, yes.
You said there's a lot of model airplanes. They were hanging down from the ceiling, right?
Yes, they were.
173. What do we see here?
It's like a kitchen table.
174.
Same kitchen table, the purse and the chair.
175.
Looks like,
Kind of beyond that kitchen table in towards the back here towards the garage.
correct.
And if we walked a little bit further, what do we see, 176?
More airplanes, more stuff stacked up back door of the house.
You open that back door, is that what we see in 177?
Yes.
Walk a little bit further in, what do we see in here?
Or vehicle, closed garage door.
And in this area, right there, that could be maybe grocery sacks, Walmart sacks, something of that nature.
It appears to be, yes.
At 179, this inside the garage,
Yes, it is.
and her, what looks to be the farm.
Correct.
180, again, we're just staying in the garage. the
Correct.
car. 181, back, show the, what type of car is that?
It's a Malibu, Chevy Malibu.
Inside of the car is the back seat.
It is.
183, what are we looking at here?
Still inside the garage, stuff stacked up on the wall of the garage.
Go back inside the house, 184, what are we looking at here?
The front door of the house.
Is that kind of the close-up area of the front door and the locking mechanism?
It is.
And that door was secured, you all tried that front door.
We did. It was secure. We could not get in.
You see the, it looks like there's a chain
Yes.
device there, that you can chain the door with. See that damage that's kind of underneath, this area right here?
Yes, I do.
It looked like that chain might have been used from time to time, and that's how it gets that damage underneath.
It looks like it's been worn.
What would that lead you to believe?
Just saying, next question.
State's Exhibit 186. What are we looking at here?
Looking back into master bedroom.
It is, and we get closer in here, is this where you find this hair?
Yes, laying on the floor.
State's Exhibit 187. What are we looking at?
Next to the bed, deceased body laying next to the bed between the dresser and on the floor.
And then State's Exhibit number 188. Is this a close-up of these hairs?
It is.
Have you found it?
Yes.
You can see that there are items here that are kind of laying down on to her head area. Is that exactly how you all found it? You didn't knock any of those things over?
We did not. That is exactly how we found her.
The doghouse one.
Any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you?
Just fine.
My name is Jobin Panicker. I represent Chemirmir, and there's a few questions for you.
Sure.
You stated that you had been with DPD for about 15 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I'm, back on March 20th, 2018, what division were you in, I'm sorry?
The North Central Deployment Unit.
Okay. And part of your duties at that time was to make entry substitutes and you said the plan to the is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you on that, within that division?
Probably about 8 years at that point.
Okay. And so in 8 years' time, I'm sure you made several entries such as this, is that correct?
Correct.
Approximately how many would you say? Just around about.
I don't know, 30, 40, 50, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know.
And it's a true statement that sometimes there are some nefarious circumstances when you make these kind of entries, and sometimes it's just you find an individual that died of natural causes. Is that correct?
Sometimes.
Okay. It just kind of depends on each situation. It's a little bit different. Is that right, Sergeant?
That's correct.
And I believe on states. Approach him.
Yes.
So on the home, at 6609 one reason that we're speaking of, Sergeant, as you approach the home and you're checking for, you said it was secured, correct? And so you said no lights on and it was locked, is that right?
Correct.
And so there's a front door that was located, I believe that's stage 279. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a driveway or is it a sidewalk?
It's a sidewalk.
So you checked that door,
Correct.
and then you walked around, and then that back patio that I guess you guys ended up making entry into,
Yes.
was that secured behind that back fence that you guys had to cut?
Yes.
The lock to get into?
Yes.
But you weren't there during that time, is that right?
Was I there when we cut the lock?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we were.
Okay. And how many total were on that, were on your entry team?
Probably 6, 5 or 6.
And how many of that 6 entered the home?
I would say all of us.
Okay. And how long did it take for you to clear the home?
Probably 2-3 minutes.
And as you cleared the home, and like Mr. Fitzmartin stated, I mean, there was a lot of items in the home. Is that
There
right?
were.
Okay. And then when you made it to that bedroom where you ended up finding Ms. Harris, outside of what appeared to be the normal, what's right there, the home itself, although a lot of information, it wasn't necessarily dirty. It was, I mean, not information, a lot of stuff. It wasn't necessarily dirty, correct?
Not necessarily dirty.
There was some order to it, although it was just a lot of things, right?
Correct.
And so in that bedroom where you found Ms. Harris and found her on the floor, that was the only place that was kind of out of order or sorts. Would you agree with that statement?
Are you referring to the paperwork and stuff that fell off the counter?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. After you found her, what was the next thing that you did?
We all exited the residence, secured her from the outside.
Okay. And how long did it take for the next wave of officers to arrive?
Probably about an hour, probably 30 minutes to an hour, probably for homicide to arrive.
Okay. Did, no, Coach Skinner, I'm sorry. And then the kitchen on State's Exhibit number 1 that's already been offered admitted. That's hard to. There were some items on that kitchen table, is that correct?
Correct.
And what are the items that you see on there?
It's like food covered with plastic, car keys, glasses, a watch, telephone.
Okay. Did it appear that food was fresh to you? Like
I didn't really study the food at the time.
Did you notice any pots or any kind of cooking utensils that were out or had been used or anything to that effect? Do you recall that?
I do not recall.
Thanks, Sergeant. Pass with you,
Anything further, Mr. Smart?
No, Judge.
All right, may this officer be released?
Yes, Judge.
Thank you. Can I see the board on the side?
I don't know if they have an objection to it.
Oh, do you have an objection to this officer being released?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Watson says no objection. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a brief break. I need to make sure I can handle some things outside of the trial today. I have some other court matters I need to take up. So, if you would please retire back to the jury room. We'll give it about a 20-minute break right now. If you all come back into the jury room, push that red.
Hey folks, I'm sorry about the feed issues we're having. Hold on, let me, still playing around with the computer. Okay, are we muted now? All right, Meredith's got to do hers too. Sorry guys, it's the vagaries of technology as we try to work our way through this. Meredith and I have to make sure that we mute both of our laptops, otherwise that's the feedback that you're getting. I'm sorry about the blurred video. This is the vagaries of technology as we work through all these issues. We actually have, the way that this comes into us, we actually have a microwave signal that's pumping that signal out to us, and then it comes in here, and all kinds of things. It's the things of the things. So Meredith, this morning we're hearing from the police sergeant who finds her body. This very much follows the chronological path that they're telling. What do you think about what we've seen so far?
I think that, it makes sense, and it's in a good context because we just heard about Miss Bartel and what she experienced at the hands of her attacker, and then they launch right into Miss Harris's apartment or house, showing the disarray. And so we can think back to Miss Bartlett's case and what she told us and kind of follow that through Miss Harris's house and almost visualize what must have happened to her. I mean, I think it was very powerful to put these pictures on after hearing Miss Bartel's testimony, because that's what's going on in our minds, is this is what must have happened to her in her last moments. And so it's very powerful and moving.
It is, and Mary Bartel, it's important to note, that's the day before. That's the day before. I mean, we're talking very close in chronology, how these happen. And, it strikes me as fascinating, and something that Judge Conyers and I talked about yesterday, is that certainly you had Mary Bartel, you had Lou Harris, but it's a Richardson police detective, and I'm assuming we're going to hear from this person at some point, who goes, I had a similar case to this, and goes back and looks at it, and in my understanding is that's the situation that triggers this huge look at all these cases. And of course they go back and they amend a whole bunch of death certificates. Do we need to change the way that we handle the deaths of the elderly?
The deaths of the elderly, in general, what struck me is the communication between individual police departments. I read crime novels and read about how things happened back during like the Ted Bundy era, where they had no ability to communicate between police departments at all, and they actually came up with a national database out of the Ted Bundy case so that they could communicate across state lines, and so everybody could kind of keep their information and disseminate that and be able to use it in investigations. I still think we have an issue between police departments in Texas, at least, where of course one department may not know what another department knows, and each detective has their own caseload and knows the facts of their case, but is there really a a way for police departments to share information like that. And I know detectives can pick up the phone and call another police department detective and say, hey, you know, have you ever seen this before? Do you know anybody who's seen this before? But they don't normally do that unless there's a reason. So yeah, it's very difficult to track people if they move from police department to police department. It's not a usual thing.
Well, then the other issue here is there was a natural inclination to believe these people died of natural causes.
Right, and that's something that you would see with the elderly or someone, you know, I guess someone in a hospital environment too, but definitely with the elderly, it's easier to prey on them because, of course, we automatically think natural causes. Should
they err more on the side of doing autopsies from here on out?
You know, that's a good question. I think that the medical examiner's office is overloaded with bodies. I know that they were overloaded back when I was a prosecutor, and even now they have a lot of work to do and not enough hands to do it, really. But yeah, I think that in an ideal world, we should autopsy everyone, right? I mean, you know, we would want to know exactly how they died so we can keep statistics better in general, and then also to be able to see if there's any foul play. But, you know, suffocation, like Miss Bartel was describing, would you be able to tell that it was foul play just because of the state of the body, or not? I mean, just it takes a really good detective and seeing things that don't make sense or stick out to them. It takes a really good detective to be able to look at that evidence and put that together and investigate.
And in many ways, what he's accused of doing is it's so diabolical because of the way that he's accused of killing these people, is smothering them and really not leaving any marks.
Right.
Anything that would say, aha, this is a murder, we need to conduct an autopsy.
Right.
Now, what do you think of the decision? You know, one of the things I'm seeing in the comments is that folks are, you know, upset that people can't be in the courtroom. We have a family member who's posting on the YouTube page who's really upset that family members cannot be in this courtroom.
Yes. Well, that's, you know, a very important part of our justice system is being able to not only confront your accuser, but for the family of the victim to be able to sit in the room and see the person who's accused of doing this. It's a psychological thing, I think, that the family of the victim would want to look at this person, and it's part of the grieving process, part of closure, part of that, and so not being able to do it, I think we are. I don't want to say surprised, but you know, we have not probably thought through how important that is to the family of the victims, how dear to their hearts it is to be able to sit there and look at the person who spent possibly my loved one's last moments with. That's a very important thing for them, and I understand completely why they would want to be in there, but the court system has really struggled with COVID and social distancing, and we're kind of cobbling together solutions to keep everyone socially distant, but we're also working with a system that's supposed to be transparent, and the community, it's a public courtroom, and the community is supposed to be able to walk in at any time and see what's going on, and now we're having to curtail that because of COVID, and that doesn't lend itself well to the justice system in general.
No, and you know this, a lot of Dallas County courtrooms are really pretty small. These are small courtrooms, and I know you know, we talked about this. I met with the judge 4 times to figure out how we could get a pool camera in the room, because normally in a trial, the pool camera would be at the back of the courtroom. Well, that can't happen. You can't have a human being where what is essentially now the jury box, because the jury is in that area, so you can't be back there. Right. And then we had to negotiate to have the camera in what would normally be the jury box, and now the judge has a camera that's, you know, that is it's a, you know, a little pan tilt zoom camera, but it's pretty basic, you know. And so you know, so there was a whole lot of machinations that went into trying to even just get our camera in there. But I can understand the feeling of family members. I mean, if this was my grandmother, I'd be pretty ticked.
Yeah,
And Mad
I would.
wouldn't even begin to cut it. I would be very angry. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, do you wait till after COVID to have a trial like this? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, you know, how you fix it. Now, I wanted to answer a question. Let me go back to this. Suddenly Beautifully, you were talking about the evidence. We are showing the evidence, but whenever there is a body, we're not going to show that. I mean, for a brief moment, that showed up on your screens, and that was unintentional. The photographer had to quickly pan away because, you know, out of respect to family members, we just don't show that. We don't show bodies either on TV or on, you know, or on a live stream. It's you know, maybe the family might want that, but as a matter of practice, that's just something we do not do. If that was my grandmother, I wouldn't want her body.
If that was me.
No, I wouldn't want that on a live stream for, you know, thousands of people to watch. That would not be something I would want. So let me ask you this, Meredith, where are we going next?
Well, I think we are going, as you said, we're going in chronological order. So we're going to go with the Richardson police detective probably who put this all together. There may be some chain of custody witnesses along the way who say, I picked up this piece of evidence and put it here and took it to the crime lab. But we're just going along with the state's case and what happened next.
But let me back up. I wanna for folks that are joining the stream and maybe you didn't see yesterday and maybe you didn't see the recap package from earlier today. Let me kind of walk you through where we're at. And unless Meredith, unless you want to do it. I mean, I know you watched the whole stream.
I wouldn't say I watched the entire stream. I did work yesterday.
You did. You did some work. You did some work. Well, tell your clients you did work. Okay,
that's right.
I'll do it. So. Yeah, this has been very much a chronological presentation. Yesterday we started out with the 911 dispatcher who got the 911 call from Mary Bartel. Then we had the paramedic who came in and, well, actually the friends found her, but the paramedic was the second witness. Then we had a police officer who wrote that initial report. And then we had this all-important deposition from Mary Bartel. Mary Bartel died in September of 2020, not from the attack. The attack was in March of 2018. But she does a deposition, about an hour-long deposition, and I know Meredith will agree with this. She was incredibly lucid, incredibly with it, and just really walked folks through this horrible thing that happened to her. And so you go from Mary Bartel, her deposition, into the Plano police officers and investigators who, oh no, I forgot one, the neighbor's son. The neighbor's son, I mean, besides Mary Bartel being an incredible hero, the neighbor's son is also heroic because he has the presence of mind to record a license plate, and that license plate leads to Chemirmir. And when they find Chemirmir, he is dumping a jewelry box in the dumpster that turns out to belong to Lou Harris. And Lou Harris, that triggers a welfare check, and as we just saw, the discovery of Lou Harris's body. So I guess I think you're right. You're probably going next into that forensic evidence, maybe an autopsy?
Yes, an autopsy. Like I said, any physical evidence that was recovered at the scene, any DNA. I'm wondering if there's DNA. I know he wore gloves at Mary Bartel's, and so he probably wore gloves also at Lou Harris's. But just if there's any sort of trace evidence, hair, fiber, anything like that, I'm sure they'll put it on. If there's not, there's not. More often than not, there is hardly any DNA or trace evidence like that, but if they have it, they'll put it on.
So the family member who's been watching the feed, he is rightfully very angry, and I don't discount that anger at all. Anger, like he says in this feed, probably doesn't even begin to cut it. Why do you think this case hasn't gotten bigger news? I mean, really, now in North Texas it has been, but not really outside the area. Why has this case, why isn't this wall-to-wall CNN?
You know, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you, really. I mean, there's just so much going on in the world today, I guess. But when I started out as a misdemeanor prosecutor, you know, we would just comb through thousands and thousands of cases, and just every police report you'd read was just a sad story of human tragedy, one right after the other. And I remember asking someone, like, how come none of this stuff is on the news? I've never heard of any of this stuff being on the news. They're like, if the news reported on all the cases that we have, there would be nothing left to report on. Like, you wouldn't have any time to report on anything else. It would just be so depressing. There's thousands of cases in the world, but, you know, this is if he's guilty of what they're accusing him of, he's guilty of at least 18 murders. It's terrifying. It's horrible. You know, you could use the word serial killer, but I think maybe because of the circumstantial nature of the case, maybe people are holding off, withholding judgment. I mean, that's all I can think of.
It's just frustrating because, you know, you look at cable news networks, and they'll run wall-to-wall coverage on the, you know, remember the missing hiker? I forget her name.
Yes.
I frankly got to where I just turned off that coverage. I don't want to say I didn't care. I'm sorry about what happened to her,
right?
But I didn't think it necessitated the level of coverage. Yet I'm not aware of any real sustained national coverage of this. And if you think about this, this is an incredible thing that he is accused of doing, of systematically stalking these elderly women, going into their homes and smothering them and killing them. And then if you think of it beyond that it escaped notice for years, and we really still, I don't think we even now have any real accounting of how many bodies we're talking about.
Right. There's just 18 that we know of.
Well, and go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know why it hasn't captured people's attention. They talk about how, you know, it's all young, pretty white girls that get the attention, and that, you know, other people aren't interested in seeing anyone else as a victim, and that there may be some truth to that. It's just that this is one of those things you can see on Dateline, you can see on 2020 or a made-for-TV movie, and yeah, I don't know why they haven't picked up on that.
Frankly, I was kind of surprised that like a court TV or something didn't come in here and want to cover this trial. And I don't know if it's because it is such a circumstantial case. We don't have the that emotional witness who's going to come in and say, "I saw him smothering Lou Harris."
Yeah,
I don't know if that's what makes the difference. I don't know. Well, I see the courtroom. Right, Nick, what's going on? Are they coming back? You just saw the judge come in. Okay, so you know. This is the story of our lives, Meredith and I know. It's like we tap dance as we wait for the judge to. She's come back in the courtroom. You know, I don't know if we're going to hear. Meredith, I kind of think the next step is going to be maybe a homicide detective.
Well, yeah. Sometimes they save the homicide detective for last. Sometimes they save the medical examiner for last, because you want to start strong and you want to end strong. The homicide detective usually is the one that puts all the pieces together for the jury. We use them to wrap up our case, and so the jury we take the picture that we painted or the puzzle that we put together, and then we just explain it all to the jury with the homicide detective and put a bow on it so that they can, you know, finish the day, finish the state's case with a real clear idea of what's happened. So I would say in a circumstantial case like this, probably the homicide detective will be last, but, you know, we'll see.
But if you're going chronological, maybe not.
Maybe not, right. But he could break from being chronological at that point. I mean, I think we can lead up all the way through the medical examiner, through the forensics, and then get to the homicide detective, and then that's it.
So if you're the defense, how do you explain this? I mean, would you want to be defending Chemirmir?
You know, it's not like a yes or no. I would do it. I think that it has challenges, of course, but there's also a lot of room for doubt, and that may be, you know, part of it is that a circumstantial case always has room for doubt. You do not have an eyewitness to say that he did this. And it is possible that that he did not commit these murders, that all he's guilty of is possession of stolen property. And I think that's where his defense attorney will go, is that there is no direct evidence tying Mr. Chemirmir to these murders, that all the murders are just a horrible, terrible thing that someone else has done, and that all Mr. Chemirmir has committed is, if he even knew that they were stolen, possession of stolen property. So that's why you've got to close in that timeline. You got to show the Walmart video. You've got to paint a real tight picture of how close in time this murder happened to when he was found with the property. And I think that's what the state is doing. Oh, I can't hear you, Tanya. Something happened. I don't want to turn my laptop on because we'll get that feedback. But I think it's your microphone or something. Is it on?
All right, can you hear me now, Meredith?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you're gonna have to turn that computer off.
Okay, did I turn it on?
Yeah, because we started talking to each other again. You can hear me in your ear, though. Oh,
I can hear you in my ear.
All
Yes.
right, well, wait, somebody's computer's still on. Hold on, is it me? I see the judge, so let me. All right.
Okay, what about me? Does
All right.
that sound weird?
Yeah. We're
Okay.
still feedbacking here a little bit. Are we off? Sorry, guys. Y'all can see that we're still kind of like dealing with technical issues. Can you hear me now, Tamika? I'm watching my YouTube feed over here. So anyway, yeah, so the jury, the judges back in the courtroom, we're just kind of waiting to see what is happening. I'm assuming they're going to come back on break here pretty soon. Can you still hear me, Meredith?
I can hear you.
Okay, well, all right. Are we still live? Am I still on? I'm still live. Okay, well, these folks don't care. They're good. So Meredith, all this technical stuff totally throws me a little
That's
bit.
okay.
Okay, so Chris G is asking how Chemirmir was finally caught. All right, I can answer that question. So, like we were talking about, there was a victim over in Plano who was attacked in her bedroom, and she survives the attack. A neighbor's son records a license plate, and that leads to Chemirmir. And then that sets in motion the series of events that leads to the discovery of Lou Harris. So let me ask you this, Meredith. How much, I think one of the difficulties for the families is going to be that we're not going to hear about all 18 of these deaths, right?
Right. I think that I read something about that where the families were upset, and understandably so. But that's very common in these cases, is if you get, I think they said they were prepared, I think the state said they were prepared to go to trial on 2 of the cases. And if they secured convictions on them, then they would dismiss the rest of the charges. And that's just what I recall reading in one of the news reports. But that's something that the it's very expensive. I know the victims don't want to hear this, and I wouldn't want to hear this either. It is very expensive to put on a criminal trial. There's the jurors that have to be paid, the bailiffs, the judge, of course the salaries of the DAs. If the defense is appointed, then they get paid out by the state, and the deputies might get overtime, the bailiffs for staying late, if there's extra security and all of that. It is very expensive to put on a criminal trial, and very difficult. And so if they secure a conviction and they get a life sentence, then once the appeals go through and he's finally convicted, and then there's no more, his appeals are exhausted, then the state really doesn't have a financial justification for going through 18 trials back to back. And they'll always have a case.
Go ahead, Meredith.
They'll always have a backup case. First one loses on appeal, or some sort of technical issue or legal issue. They don't want him to go free, obviously, so they may try him on another case as well, but this is going to be their strongest case. And once they secure a conviction, we call it in the interest of judicial economy, but it's also, taxpayer dollars. And you have to look at the facts of those other cases. How strong are those other cases? Are we likely to secure a conviction? And can we justify going to trial on all those cases? And so I think what the state has done is a balancing test and really weighed their options. And that's very common, but understandable that each victim's family would not only want to see him in court and look him in the face, but also want their loved one to have their time to be remembered and honored and respected as well.
Yeah, I get it, and Sean, who is watching on YouTube, like I said, is a family member of one of the victims. I believe it was Leah Corden. Sean, I know you'll correct me if I've got the name incorrect, but and his feeling is that his grandmother paid taxes, and that her case deserved to be heard. And
Absolutely.
I can't be unsympathetic with that position and say it's wrong.
No.
Now I do know that they are planning. I've been told that they're planning to try a second one of these cases. Why would they do that? Why would they? If he's convicted and given life in prison without possibility of parole, why would you try a second one?
Well, there's always a chance that it could be overturned on appeal. And so once the trial is over, people tend to think that it's done. He's convicted, he's going to go away, and they're going to lock the door. But he has a whole access to the entire appellate process. He can appeal to the appeals court and then on up from there. So you want to just make sure that you have a backup case, backup conviction.
Back on the record and cause number F1875401, and where we left off was the state of Texas was still presenting evidence and testimony in their case in chief. Mr. Fitzmartin, you may continue.
We'll call Detective Shelton.
All right, hello, Detective. Hello. Can you please raise your right hand for me? Do you so solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. You have a seat. You can take your mask off to testify if you would like, or keep it on, however you want to do it, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
May I proceed, Judge?
Yes.
Good morning, Detective Shelton.
Good morning, sir.
Introduce yourself and spell your last name.
Casey Shelton, C-A-Y-C-E, Shelton, S-H-E-L-T-O-N.
And how are you employed?
I'm a detective with the Dallas Police Department.
Currently, where are you assigned to the Dallas Police Department?
Currently, I'm assigned to the Public Integrity Unit.
Back in March of 2018, what section were you assigned to?
I worked in the Homicide Unit.
Tell me about your career at the Dallas Police Department. How did you start off and how did you get into the homicide?
I've been on about 22 and a half years. I began as a patrol officer, promoted to senior corporal, began training rookies coming out of the academy and patrol, and then worked covert deployment, plainclothes, late nights, did late nights for about 11 years. Moved on to the robbery unit, investigated robberies, kidnappings, and then on the homicide, investigated all manners of death. And then special investigations, officer-involved shootings, death in custody, a little bit of property crime work, and then now I'm in public integrity.
Okay. How long were you in the homicide division?
Total, about 5 years.
And when the homicide unit, I think it's pretty much run the same way today as it was back there, but they all kind of a team when it comes to these cases, and there's a lead detective, but then you all kind of work as a team.
That's correct. It's handled as a team concept.
Okay. There's a lead detective. Who's the lead detective on this case?
This particular case, Detective Brian Taylor.
And then how do y'all work how does it come up as a batting order or anything like that? Explain that.
That's exactly right. That's how I describe it, as a batting order. There's a list of, at least back then, every detective. You're up for the next case that came in, if you will, a homicide. And once the homicide came in, you went back to the bottom of the list while you worked your case, and then the next one, on deck. Now they're up next to get the case.
So, did you have a normal shift that you would also work?
I worked evenings, so 4 to midnight.
And Detective Tabor, did he also work 4 to midnight, do you recall?
He worked the day shift.
But nonetheless, if Detective Tabor's at home on this, and at his time off, and a homicide comes in, he knows he's next up.
That's correct. He was on call. Whoever's up for the next murder, they were on call along with whoever was on call in the rotation. If you're up for a murder and nothing comes in for 2 weeks, then you're just stuck on call for 2 weeks.
Okay. And so on March 20th, I'm sure you had your own cases that you were working on.
Correct.
But you're on duty.
That's correct.
So did a call come in about a homicide or a potential homicide at 6609 Warm Breeze?
Yes, sir, did.
And who all was, were you at basically headquarters on both of you?
No, I think my partner and I were out responding. We were on another death call, not a murder, but just another call out that we got when we got the initial notification of Warm Breeze.
And did you go with your partner to the location at 6609 Warm Breeze?
Yes, sir, I did.
And is that in the city of Dallas?
Yes, sir.
The county of Dallas?
Yes, sir.
In the state of Texas?
Yes, sir, it is.
So when you arrived out there, describe the scene as you recall it.
As I recall, there were Dallas patrol officers there along the front, on the street in front of the house. I think we had some Plano officers, and then we also had Plano police detectives and some of their intelligence covert guys there briefing and talking about what they had done that day and what led them to that particular house.
Okay. And so Plano had talked to you about an attack on a woman by the name of Mary Bartel and the investigation of Billy Chemirmir and how they wound up at 6609 Warm Breeze.
That's correct, sir.
Did you and your partner at some point in time go in? Who was your partner at the time?
Detective Tim Stewart.
Did you all make entry into 6609?
We eventually went in, yes, sir.
We've seen pictures of the scene there. One of the entry team members walked us through that. And so I want to kind of focus you more on what you did when you got there. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Did you also at some point in time go and survey the area and talking with neighbors and different people trying to find any cameras at people's houses?
Yes, sir. That was part of my role, investigating the actual scene, canvassing, talking to neighbors, next door neighbors, looking for any cameras that could give us an idea of who had passed by, what may have occurred that day.
And were you able to find anything, or any of the detectives really find anything that would link a Honda or a Hyundai Sonata to driving past any of these cameras that you all were able to look at, either pick up anything like this?
I did not, no, sir.
Okay, so when you made entry into this house, permission to approach.
You may.
Let me show you what's with Market States Exhibits 108. I'm sorry, 189 through through 202. Do you recognize these photos as from that 6609 wall?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do they fairly accurately represent the things depicted in there from that?
Yes, sir, they do.
We'll offer stakes of 189 through 202.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, stakes exhibits 189 through 202 will be admitted.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Now, when you were inside, was Miss Harris still in the inside the house?
Sorry?
Was Miss Harris still inside the house?
Yes, sir.
At some point in time, did the medical examiner or investigator for the medical examiner come out?
Yes, sir, the death investigator arrived.
And what is their role when they arrive?
Their role in these deaths, they examine the body, a cursory examination, they bag the hands, paper sacks over the hands, preserve any evidence. We look for any signs of trauma, any signs of injury, any signs that may have caused, any apparent signs that may have caused the death. And to collect any medication, any problems.
Did you all talk about a medical condition or evidence called petechia?
Yes, sir, we did.
And what is that?
What is
Judge,
petechia?
I'm going to object. We think Shelton is qualified, and so I request that he's qualified as such.
Do you know what petechia is?
I have a general knowledge based on my training and experience. Yes, sir.
He may continue.
And generally, you don't have to get into the science specifics of it. What are you looking for when you're looking for petechia?
As a homicide detective, not an expert, but as a homicide detective at a scene with a deceased body, petechia that's been pointed out to me, it's spotting, blood spotting, typically wherever there's trauma or high pressure, and particularly around the eyes, in the eyes, that would show high blood pressure or signs of some sort of trauma in the head that we've seen in strangulation, hanging, suffocation, stuff like that.
And was that pointed out to you in this case?
Yes, sir. Mr. Potts did identify that for us.
With looking at Miss Harris's face, did you notice anything dealing with her lipstick?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did you notice?
The absence of the lipstick that didn't look consistent with the rest of the makeup she was wearing.
Did it look like as it might have been smeared on her face?
Yes, sir.
Was there another, at some point in time, did you all think to go and check the pillows on her bed?
Yes, sir, we did.
And did you notice anything when you looked at one of the pillows on the bed?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
That appeared to be the same color fuchsia lipstick that she had been wearing, had been smeared.
Smeared on one of
the pillow.
Was there also a discussion about some keys that had been found on Mr. Chemirmir when he was arrested?
Yes, sir, there was.
And what happened in regards to those keys of Mr. Chemirmir? Were they brought to the 6609 Warm Breeze location?
Yes, sir. I asked the Plano Police Department detective to retrieve the keys that they had taken and bring them to the location, to Warm Breeze.
To Warm Breeze. Tell me what happened with those keys once they got to Warm Breeze.
We did a visual comparison of a key that I believe had been recovered from a friend that had a spare key to the house, Miss Harris's house. And then we had PES, physical evidence, photograph the keys. And then we used those keys recovered from Mr. Chemirmir to unlock the front doors of the house, the glass door and the actual front door proper.
The security door on the front, it opened that one, and then
Yes,
it also opened the deadbolts on the actual door of the house.
That's correct.
Did you then collect that pillow that was on the bed?
And then I requested physical evidence to collect the pillow for evidence.
And there's also a nightgown and a sweater.
Correct.
Excuse me. Permission to publish the photos, Judge.
You may.
Here's State's Exhibit 189. Is this, what are we looking at here?
Overall, this is Miss Harris's bedroom.
And at this point in time, her body has been removed.
Yes, Miss Harris.
190, you look at a close-up of the bed, of the head part of the bed.
Yes, sir.
And we can see in here there's a nightgown and a speckled pillow right underneath there.
Yes, sir.
Another, 191, another angle of that.
Yes, sir.
192, is this the pillow, the bottom side of that pillow?
Yes, sir, the bottom side.
And then underneath, 192, underneath this pillow, what are we looking at right underneath here?
Looks like a thin sweater.
State's Exhibit number 193, is at the underside of that pillow.
Yes, sir.
Permission to approach?
You may.
She was from Market States Exhibit number 203.
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit number 204 and 205.
Yes, sir.
Are these those items that we were just looking at there in those pictures?
Yes, sir, there.
We'll offer State's Exhibit numbers 203, 204, and 205.
No, Judge, you got it.
State Exhibits 203, 204, and 205 will be in here.
If we look on the bottom side of 203, is that same pink mark?
Yes, sir.
There are no other stains at all on 203.
Not that I do.
That's the other pillow on the other side of the bed.
Yes, sir.
There's no stains on that pillow.
No, sir.
Stains, Stacy number 195, another pillow on the bed.
Yes, sir.
No stains on that.
None there.
All right, Stacy's number 196. Are we looking at that front security door of the house?
Yes, sir. Sir, front door.
And 197, see some keys in there.
Yes, sir.
Look back at 190. You can see how the keys are kind of up and I don't know, parallel to the door there. And then we click them on 197. They've turned.
Yes, sir.
Show you State's Exhibit number 133. Those keys.
Yes, sir. There.
And those are the keys that are found on Mr. Chemirmir.
Yes, sir.
198, we show that those keys have unlocked that front door.
That's correct.
State's Exhibit 199. There again, we're now at the house door, same condition, 200. Where State's Exhibit number 133, the keys found on Mr. Chemirmir are unlocking the front door.
Correct.
State's Exhibit number 202, that's Ms. Harris at the scene.
Yes, sir.
And then here's a comparison of State's Exhibit number 202 and 192. And when you had talked about Ms. Harris and the condition of her mouth and the condition of her lipstick,
Yes,
did you
sir.
say it was smeared?
Yes, sir.
You see that? And 190. State's number 202, and then again in 192.
Yes, sir.
The garage door, do you remember it being, the big door?
Yes,
Do
sir.
you remember being shut and locked?
Yes, sir. I recall it was locked.
Later, did you also, was there a search done of Mr. Chemirmir's apartment?
Yes, sir.
Were you part of that?
Yes, sir, I
Team
was.
that went up and worked on that? State's Exhibit number State's Exhibit number 37 is already in evidence, and that's just a picture of those keys
Yes, sir.
that were found with Mr. Chemirmir that opened the doors to Warwick.
Yes, sir.
I'll pass it.
Mr. Warren?
Just briefly, Jared. How you doing, Detective?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, you say that you've been with Homicide for about 5 years, correct?
That's correct, sir.
And that's when you kind of got your working knowledge of TTF, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now, just to be fair, so the jury has a good understanding so far of what TTF is, there are other causes for TTF besides the things that you listed, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Like, obviously, when you're, at the time, what your position was, the things that you come into contact with while TTF will pop up would be strangling, smothering, things of that nature, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But TTF can also be developed by any kind of straining, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Coughing, excessive sneezing, weightlifting, vomiting, is that
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Anything further, Mr. McMorgan?
No, you're
All right. May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
That was, I request he remain on our call.
Subject to response?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So, Detective Shelton, you know how this works?
Yes, ma'am.
Please make sure that all parties have access to you, whether that be by your cell phone number or your office or desk number, so that if you should be needed for recall for the defense's case, that you'll be available.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Other than that, you're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes. Judge, we'll call Richard Reinhart.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
There you go. Will you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you so solemnly swear and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you may have a seat. And as I was going to tell you, you are free to testify in your mask if you would like, or you can keep it off because we have a protective barrier around you, okay?
I'm good.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fitzmartin.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Mr. Reinhart. If you please introduce yourself and spell your name.
My name is Richard Philip Reinhart, Reinehart.
And you live here in the Dallas area.
Yes, sir. I live in far north Dallas.
Did you at one time know an individual by the name of Lou T. Harris?
Mrs. Harris was my mother-in-law.
All right. So let me permission to approach.
Yes.
Show you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 206. Is that Ms. Harris?
Yes, that is my mother-in-law.
I'll offer State's Exhibit number 206.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit number 206 will be admitted.
Okay. I'd like to first talk to you a little bit. You know Miss Harris' story pretty well, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So I want to talk to you a little bit. How did you come to meet her daughter?
I used to manage an optical shop at the Sam's Club in Addison, and she worked at the Sam's Club as like seasonal or temporary help, and we met there.
When was that?
That was in 1994.
And sometime afterwards, you all started courting and then got married.
Correct. We were married in 1995.
So through that relationship with your wife, did you that's how you came to know Miss Harris?
Yes.
So let's talk about Miss Harris. Do you know where she was born?
Yes, sir. She was born in Hainan, China, which is an island in the South China Sea.
And at some point in time, did she move to Vietnam?
Yes, that was prior to World War II. She was just a small child. At that time, it was French Indochina.
Okay. And so tell us about her life starting there and moving forward. You know, not every day, obviously, but just kind of the highlights of her life.
Well, she grew up in Cholon, which is the Chinese section of Saigon. And she went to school there, and then she opened up a business, which she owned a restaurant and bar in downtown Saigon, which is, kind of near the French embassy.
Okay.
And she ran that, and her restaurant was across the street from Caltex, which is where my father-in-law worked. That's where their offices were. And so they met and married in 1974.
Okay. Let me back up just a little bit. Was she married previously to Mr. Harris?
She was married prior to Mr. Harris. Her first husband was in the South Vietnamese Army, and he was killed in 1970.
And did she have some children with that man?
Yes, my wife, and then two brothers, actually three brothers. Two still live in it's now Ho Chi Minh City, and one of them still runs that restaurant, which is still in existence, and the other one lives in Alberta, Canada.
Okay. So at this restaurant, do you know the name of the restaurant?
It's called Mike Kim.
Was Miss Harris, was that did she go by the name Kim?
Yes, she did. I never referred to her as Lou or anything like that. It was always Kim.
You said that Caltech, what kind of company is Caltech?
Caltex was an oil company. It was a joint overseas venture between Chevron and Texaco.
And William Harris worked for that company?
Yes.
And you said that their offices were close to where Kim Miss Harris's restaurant bar.
Correct.
And that's how they met.
Yes.
And at some point in time, did Miss Harris move to the United States?
Yes, she did. When the demise of Saigon was imminent, she had already married Mr. Harris, and he was called out to Hong Kong by his company, but he had arranged paperwork for her, and she actually got out of Saigon on a helicopter off the American embassy to an aircraft carrier in the South China Sea, and then from there she went to Subic Bay, and my father-in-law found her and got her from there, and then they went to Hong Kong.
Okay.
And then they lived in Tanzania for a while for the company until Bill retired.
And then when he retired, they moved to this area?
Yes, they moved to the far north Dallas area.
And then at some point in time, did her daughter come and join her?
Yes, my wife Lon came to the United States in 1990. She was sponsored by my in-laws, and she lived with them until we were married.
And the house that you live in is very close to this location.
It's walking distance.
And did you select that because it's close to where the Harris?
Yes, yes. My wife and my mother-in-law were very, very close.
Your wife has also passed away.
Yes, she died of cancer in 2013.
Since 2013 up until 2018, would you stay in contact with Ms. Harris?
Yes, we were not like buddy, but yes, we still saw each other, and I would go over there sometimes. She would go pick up stuff at the grocery store for me, that sort of thing, and we would get together and go have dinner sometimes.
Permission to approach?
Yes.
What kind of person was she?
She was a very fun person, very, very humorous, very generous, and she was as I tell people, most people hate their mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was a hoot.
Yeah.
I mean, she was very, very fun to be around.
You had mentioned that she's generous. Lots of gifts?
Yeah, I mean, she'd like your birthday, she'd give you a 100 spot, no problem. Along with, always had a $2 bill on the gift card.
Okay.
And, but she was, just good.
Her other family members, would she send packages, gifts, things like that?
Absolutely.
You had mentioned that there was paperwork and things that had to happen in order to get her from Vietnam to move with Mr. Harris. I'm showing you State's number 154. Does this look consistent with the paperwork that you're talking about for her name would have been moved to Vang at that point in time?
Yes, that Vang was her family name, and that looks like an affidavit from the American Embassy in Saigon, Republic of Vietnam, in which my father-in-law, William Richard Harris, was sponsoring her.
Okay. 153, is that also looks like some sort of paperwork dealing with this Harris, known as Lutu Vang, at that point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And so if you look up here on State's Exhibit number 317, that's State's Exhibit number 130 is up here, posted on that board. You see that?
I can't see it very well.
Okay, why don't you step down and come take a quick look and just see if that's the same card up there.
Yes, that is it.
Okay, all right. Now, you said that your wife and your mother were very close. So they own a lot of the similar things, like with one by one and one by the other?
Oftentimes, yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 156. Do you recognize this jewelry box?
Yes, That is a red lacquer jewelry box. My wife had one just like it, but it was in gold.
Okay. So you know that this would have been Miss Harris's jewelry box?
Yes, I've seen it many times.
I'm going to show you state's exhibits. This is State's Exhibit 138. Do you recognize this handwriting?
Yes, that's my mother-in-law's handwriting.
And then, right in the middle there, Friday, February, that 16 February 2018, is that common for the way she would write the dates?
Yes.
And you see the name L-O-A-N there?
Yes.
What does that speak to you about?
Well, Lon was my wife. L-O-A-N was how it was spelled. Lon Kibak Boom was her maiden name.
All right. And so, did they have an account that they shared?
They had a checking account that was set up. If Kim would go out of town, it was a joint account, but that way it was funded, and my wife could take care of bills, or if she needed something, whatever, it was there.
Now, we've talked about, I've shown you State's Exhibit number 206, and that's a picture of Miss Harris. Is that kind of a little bit symbolic of her nature right there, that look on her face and the smile?
Yes, very much so.
Well, she's got a green ring on in this picture. Doesn't really show. I guess you can see that it's green on that up there. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
I'll show you State's Exhibit number 147. Do you recognize that ring?
And that is the ring that was in that picture, which belonged to my mother-in-law, Mrs. Harris.
You said she went by the name Kim?
Absolutely, yes. That was her necklace.
So that Mr. Harris worked for a company called Caltex.
Yes, he did.
Did he go by Bill?
Yes.
It's 26, State's Exhibit 266. The Kim necklace was State's Exhibit number 150. This is State's Exhibit 148. You see this gold bracelet?
Yes, sir.
You notice on the bracelet that she is wearing you can tell on there, right here, you see that little design that's kind of like a little cutout, or it looks like a little ripply design?
Yes.
On there? I'll show you State's Exhibit number 148. And you also see that ripply design on that bracelet.
Yes, I do.
And State's Exhibit number 206, she's also wearing a gold necklace. State's Exhibit number 149, there's another gold necklace. Is that consistent?
Yes.
Now, would there be any reason that you're aware of, Ms. Harris, to get rid of these items?
I'm the judge, that obviously called for speculation.
The witness can answer if he knows.
Do you know any reason why she would get rid of these things?
No, those were her personal items that she wore every day.
We've seen pictures of her house. State's Exhibit 169. State's Exhibit 170 is represented there.
Yes.
Did she get rid of anything?
Not really, no.
Okay. Mr. Harris, did he start collecting things later on in life?
He did, in the last couple of years, he went a little odd.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all these, we see a bunch of airplanes hanging down from the ceiling, a bunch of model airplane boxes and different versions of the same thing. What was that all about? Do you know?
Well, he was a pilot, private pilot, but he was always fascinated by aviation. And as he got into his latter years, he tended to just buy things. And he would buy stuff and go to Walmart and buy it again. And they would end up with a collection of stuff. And I always told Kim she should sell it on eBay, but she did not.
She did do it. Let's talk a little about State's Exhibit number 139. There's cash, but then there's these stacks of $2.
Yes.
See that? Tell me about Miss Harris's $2 bills.
That was her thing. She just thought they were neat. And so she would go to the bank and just get a whole bunch of them. She'd have to order them, but she would give them out as gifts. So if you got like a Christmas card or a birthday card or something, it'd always have a $2 bill in it. And I have 3 of them on my refrigerator at home that I just never spent because they're still there.
Now, the night that that this all happened, you were contacted by the police department?
Yes, I was.
And they talked to you about the situation that was happening up in the arrest of Mr. Chemirmir and the items that were found up there?
Not at that point.
Okay.
Okay, I had 2 police officers come to my house wanting to do a welfare check on Mrs. Harris, asking if I had a key to her house, which I didn't, but I knew one of her friends that did, and we were able to get him in. And they then told me that, you know, Mrs. Harris had passed, so I did not know that anything was awry.
Later that night, did they talk to you about some items?
Yes, and so after that, I went to my house and took care of some things and made some phone calls, and then I went back over there to see what was going on, to see what I could find. And that's where there was a lot of police cars and the detectives were there, and when they found out who I was, they asked me to look at pictures, and they said that, yeah, there had been some criminal activity. There had been, you know, my mother-in-law had been murdered.
Okay. The items that they showed you, was that pictures of that jewelry box?
Yes.
And you were able to identify that jewelry box, even though it's up, and they took those pictures up at Pier Ridge, up here, like in State's Exhibit number 125. But that jewelry box being up there should have been in Miss Harris's house here in Walmart.
Yes, that is correct.
And so you were able to identify that items that are in Pier Ridge with Mr. Chemirmir came from the location of 6609 Walmart.
Correct.
Now, I want to show you State's Exhibit number 178. Is that Miss Harris's garage?
Yes.
And that's her car?
That's her Chevy Malibu.
And then in this chair here, 178, is that a rolling chair?
Yes, it is.
And there's a little bucket in there, and you see Walmart bags and items inside that chair. What would she do with that chair when she'd get groceries?
Well, sometimes she would get things. I mean, she was not a large woman. I mean, she was about 5'2". So she would get things out of the car, put them on the chair, and roll them up to across the garage, so she didn't have to carry it.
Okay. And that's what it looks like here, is that she had put some items in there and didn't get them inside the house.
Correct.
Okay, so I've got that same picture up here on Warren Bridge. You can step down and see. That's what that is. That the Walmart items are the bags here in the garage.
That looks like the same picture, yes.
This is just a smaller version of Miss Harris, right? That's in
Yes.
I told you I was going to have to show you another photo of Miss Harris.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 207. Is that another photo of your mother-in-law, Luty Harris?
Yes, that's my mother-in-law.
Does it have the a unique number underneath of IFS 1805586?
It does.
We'll offer State's Exhibit number 207 for record purposes.
No objection, Your Honor.
Number 207 will be admitted for record purposes.
Judge will pass one.
Mr. Moore?
No question, Your Honor.
All right. May this witness be released?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
Mr. Reinhart, you are free to step down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
We'll call Dr. Danielson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you will please raise your right hand for me. Do you so solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. Have a seat. And doctor, you can testify with your mask on or without. It's up to you. You have that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Fitzmartin?
Thank you, Judge. May I proceed, Judge? Good afternoon, or, sorry, good morning.
Morning.
You're, could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name?
Certainly. My name is Travis Danielson. Last name is Danielsen.
And how are you employed?
I'm currently employed as a medical examiner at the Regional Forensic Center in Knoxville, Tennessee, currently.
In 2018, how are you employed?
I was employed as a fellow physician at the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office.
So, did you have an occasion at that time to participate in the performance of an autopsy on Blue T. Harris?
Yes, I did.
Can you please describe your background and your training that allows you to hold that type of position?
Certainly. I graduated from medical school from St. George's University in 2012. After that, I performed 3 years of anatomic pathology residency here in Dallas at UT Southwestern. I completed a 2-year fellowship in neuropathology, also here in Dallas at UT Southwestern, followed by a 1-year fellowship here in Dallas in forensic pathology.
And then after your fellowship, so what is UT Southwestern, or the medical center?
So UT Southwestern has a pathology residency training program for physicians who want to go into the field of pathology, and that's where I attended my residency and fellowship training.
And then what is the medical examiner's office?
So the medical examiner's office is a forensic pathology fellowship program to train future medical examiners. And that office performs autopsies, typically medical legal autopsies, to determine the cause and manner of death.
And so the fellowship that you were doing there, is that like more of a specialized training in order to do this forensic pathology?
Correct, yes. Pathology residency is required prior to specialized training in forensic pathology.
And then once you're done there, your job is basically to try to find a job, a full-time job somewhere.
Correct.
And is that what took you out to where you are now?
Yes, I was actually employed in Colorado Springs, Colorado for the first 2.5 years of my career, and I've since recently moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm continuing there as a medical examiner as well.
And that seems to be kind of the role of medical examiners. You kind of go where the job is, or the better, maybe you keep kind of getting into a better role, right?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. All right, so I want to bring you back to 2018, and let's just talk generally about what an autopsy is, okay?
Yes.
What is an autopsy?
So an autopsy is essentially a post-mortem examination of a deceased person. An autopsy includes an external examination of the body, obviously the outside of the body, noting certain things like eye color, hair color, scars, tattoos, things of that nature. The external exam includes any kind of documentation of any injuries that are visible on the outside of the body. Following the external examination, an autopsy includes an internal examination, which entails removing the organs from the body and examining them for any kind of natural disease process or any kind of injuries that may be indicated internally.
You also, so your role is to basically try to determine the cause of death and the manner of death.
That's correct. I think the overall goal of the autopsy itself is to determine the cause of death, what disease process or injury resulted in the person's death. And then manner of death is something more specific to forensic pathology.
So what are the classifications of deaths that you might have?
Are you speaking in the manner of death?
Yeah, like homicide, accident.
Certainly. So in forensic pathology, we have 5 death classifications that we use. Natural. A natural death is due solely to natural disease with no other traumatic or drug interaction with that. An accidental death is somewhat self-explanatory. It's the injury occurring, it's such as like an example would be a motor vehicle accident. Suicide is also relatively self-explanatory. It's the death at one's own hands. A homicide is defined as death at the hands of another person. And undetermined is a manner classification that is reserved for it doesn't mean that we don't know. It just simply means that we don't have enough information to make a accurate determination of the manner of death.
When you all are doing your investigation, do you also take into account the circumstances under which the individual was found?
Yes, absolutely. I think the autopsy is a part of the process, but it's a singular part. We have to take into consideration information from law enforcement, information from witnesses. It's an entire medical legal death investigation, essentially.
Permission approach? Doctor. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 223. Is that a copy of your report?
Yes, it is.
And then State's Exhibit number 207 through 218. Are those all photos taken at the time of the autopsy?
Yes, they are.
At this time, we'll offer State's Exhibit 223 and State's Exhibits 208 through 218 for all purposes.
So State's Exhibit 208 or 218?
Yes.
Do you have any objections?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No difference in 223 now.
Okay, 223 will be admitted.
And no objections, Your Honor, to 208 through 218.
So no objection to 208, to 218, they will be admitted.
Permission to publish it.
You may.
So, Doctor, when you do these, the autopsy, at the end, do you put all your information into one final report, and that's what 223 is?
That's correct.
And then as you're going through the stages of the autopsy, are you taking photos before, during, and then maybe even after of some of the items that you might extract from the body?
Yes.
So if we look at State's Exhibit number 223, you have the time of death of 9:09 and the date found. And so that's, you don't, are you able to determine the actual time of death of Ms. Harris through an autopsy?
No, in general, we consider the time of death is the time that the person was found.
So it could have been earlier, it could have been a minute earlier, it could have been hours earlier, you don't really know.
Correct.
Are there ways to be able to determine an approximate time of death as far as like maybe a week or two or something like that if a body is found later? You know what I'm saying?
Certainly, I mean, there are things decomposition-wise that we can identify during an autopsy, especially during the external examination, that can give you an indication of that time frame. In this case, I didn't find any of those to be present.
And when you're talking about if an individual was alive, let's say at 3:27 that same day, and we have video proof of that, then the findings that you're going to have are not going to be able to help you determine the exact moment of death.
Oh, no, sir.
Okay, so you put down her body weight, 118 pounds and 60 inches, which I'm going to take a stab at math here. Is that 5 feet?
That's 5 feet tall, correct.
Okay. Nothing unusual about organs or anything like that?
No, the organ weights appear to be relatively normal.
You list off what the body's wearing, and so they just kind of as how you have found it.
Correct. A body is received with the clothing on, any jewelry, anything that we have on the body at the time, and we collect those items and we inventory those items.
as far as the body is found, there's no injuries as far as like a gunshot wound or a stabbing or anything?
No clear, obvious injuries such as that.
The next page, you start marking off things that may not be, for lack of a better word, normal on a body.
Correct.
That you would expect to find.
Correct.
So there's a scar on her neck, something that had happened and had healed.
Correct.
So now we get into your evidence of injury, and you've called this as a smothering.
Correct.
All right, let's talk about that. This first word on there, petechial hemorrhages, or first two words. What are petechial hemorrhages?
Petechial hemorrhages are small, fine, pinpoint hemorrhages, areas of redness on the skin, indicative of presumably or theoretically a ruptured blood vessel under the skin.
And how do those occur?
How they occur is somewhat of debate. Like I said, theoretically, it's believed that they're the result of ruptures of small blood vessels under the skin.
What would cause small blood vessels under the skin to rupture?
Well, petechial hemorrhages are findings that are often seen in cases of asphyxial death, smothering being a type of asphyxial death. So it's certainly something that we see often in asphyxial deaths. However, with that said, they are a nonspecific finding. They do not point to an actual cause. They do not rule out other causes or injuries. So they're a nonspecific finding.
So you would need, if you found a body and that's all that you had were the petechial hemorrhages, and without anything else, would you be able to determine that that person was smothered versus maybe had some sort of a cardiac arrest situation that caused them to convulse or something that might cause that?
Correct. You would not be able to make that determination without some kind of knowledge of the scene, some kind of investigative information. As I stated, alone by themselves, they are nonspecific. They can be seen in natural diseases. They can be seen in injury states such as this.
Okay. And so you have found some petechial hemorrhages on the left anterior palpebral, and I should let you read these things.
The inferior palpebral conjunctiva. So that's the so if you consider the eye, the white of the eye is the bulbar conjunctiva, and the pink tissue around the eyeball, the white of the eye, the pink tissue is the palpebral conjunctiva.
And then the eyelids found?
That's essentially, upper eyelid is, yes.
Okay. And then around her neck, chest, left shoulder, and breast.
Correct.
Now, this internal examination, when you switch to internal, that means you've actually made some sort of incision into the body and you're looking inside the body.
Correct.
And what have you found in there when it comes to these petechial hemorrhages?
So there additionally, on the inside of the body, there are small, again, petechial hemorrhages, those pinpoint hemorrhages on the laryngeal mucosa, so that's a fancy word for the tissue that lines the throat. And then also I noted petechial hemorrhages on the epicardial surface. That's another fancy word for the tissue that covers the surface of the heart, so epicardium on top of the heart. So there were petechial hemorrhages there as well.
Now, does that lead you to any more determination when it comes to this?
Again, it's another piece, but I'd have to say it's considered a non-specific finding, but it's another piece of information.
Okay, you had mentioned the next paragraph down about the hemorrhaging somewhere in the neck muscles. Tell me about that.
So we perform, and typically in cases that maybe asphyxial deaths, we perform a anterior neck dissection, and what that means is we reflect back the skin, and there's these very thin muscles in the front part of the neck, and so we dissect those muscles out to determine if there's any hemorrhage in those muscles. Hemorrhaging in those muscles, it could be nonspecific. It's often seen more often in cases of strangulation asphyxia. And so that's the process we go through. In pretty much any asphyxial death, you perform an anterior neck dissection.
Now, when you're worried about these asphyxial deaths as you're talking about, that basically describe what do you mean by that in layman's terms of asphyxial death?
Certainly. So asphyxia is generally, it means a failure of the body to receive oxygen. So if you really think about it, we all essentially die of asphyxia eventually. But asphyxial deaths in these instances, there's really three categories. There's suffocation, which is blocking of the airway of getting air into the lungs, so blocking the mouth or nose. And examples of that would be choking, such as like choking on a piece of food. You're no longer able to get air into your lungs. The other type is strangulation, and so strangulation tends to mean there's external compression of the blood vessels of the neck. So that's a failure of the body to move oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. So those are two of the main types of asphyxia. There's also chemical asphyxiants, but that's more of a internal process.
Okay. So we're talking about the lack of basically oxygen to the brain.
Correct.
And it can happen either through, if you see those TV shows or whatever where people are choking someone, and they can compress the veins in their neck to cause the blood not to go.
Correct, and that's a common misuse of the term. Anytime there's compression on the outside of the neck, that's considered strangulation. Choking is, in forensic pathology, is considered an object within the airway itself, blocking air from moving into the lungs.
Now, in this case, though, if we're going to go hypothetically, let's say someone was to place a pillow over the nose mouth area. Tell me how do these findings line up with that?
So smothering, as I stated in the heading here, smothering is a type of suffocation asphyxia. So smothering would fall under the first method I described, where you're preventing air from moving in through the mouth and or the nose and getting to the lungs. So you're blocking the flow of air to the lungs.
Okay.
So that's smothering. Smothering is, like I said, a suffocation type of asphyxia.
So as we move down your report, there's also, you did a dissection of the posterior neck and the back musculature. And what were your findings there?
So a posterior neck dissection is a special dissection that is often performed, in a case such as this, where you may have occult trauma or trauma that you might not be able to see from the general autopsy procedure itself. And so it simply means we make an incision in the back of the neck and expose the musculature of the back of the neck and the upper back. And I believe there's a small 3/4 inch area of hemorrhage within a muscle on the right side of the upper back.
And there again, you don't know how that got there, you're just documenting that there is a hemorrhage, or when you say hemorrhage, that means a bleeding area inside.
Correct. A hemorrhage is a fancy word for bleeding. Contusion, I guess, could be another word, or bruise. Okay. And again, like you said, I can't tell you when that occurred.
Other injuries that you find, there's a contusion or a bruise to the right wrist?
Correct. There are, I believe, 4 documented contusions or bruises on the right wrist within this report.
Okay, it looks like there's one, you call it posterolateral?
Correct, posterolateral, so the back and outside part of the wrist, and then anterolateral, meaning front and outside part.
Okay, and so apart from those injuries, the rest of your report is just documenting the other things that you did as far as the dissection of Miss Harris's body. Correct. And apart from those injuries that you've listed, were there any other abnormalities to her?
I think there is documentation in the report of an injury to the cervical spinal cord. So the cervical spinal cord is the spinal cord that's part of the neck. As part of that neck dissection and that posterior neck dissection that I performed, I removed the spinal cord to see if there was any trauma to the spinal cord or any of the bones in there. I did note that there was an area of bleeding, hemorrhage, near the third cervical vertebrae, or part of the spinal cord. The significance of that I can't comment on. It's a finding, but I'm not certain. I don't have any other findings to support how or why that is there.
Okay. You also did a toxicology and found that there was no alcohols or drugs in there.
Correct.
Show you State's Exhibit number 208. Now, what are we looking at here on State's Exhibit 208?
This is a photo taken during the external portion of the autopsy. You can see the scale with the case number on it there. This is a photo of Miss Harris's face.
Now, when we look at in this area here, what are you focusing on, or what are we seeing in this area?
So it's faint and it's somewhat difficult to see, but there are tiny little red, like I described, pinpoint. Those are the petechial hemorrhages on the face.
So when we want to stay focused on it. There we go. So these little tiny spots that we're looking at in there.
Correct.
Is that what you're pointing out?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Would you expect those to be there without some sort of trauma to her body?
I guess, as we stated earlier, they are nonspecific. They can happen in natural diseases, as you stated earlier. It's unusual, and it's certainly a significant finding, yes.
And you didn't find that she was suffering from any of those natural diseases that we caused?
No.
State's Exhibit number 209.
So this is a close-up photo of, again, Miss Harris's face. This is the same eye, and we've kind of folded the lower eyelid down here, and you can see there's some small petechial hemorrhages and then a single large petechial hemorrhage along that tissue.
And that's what I'm pointing at right there?
Correct.
.210.
And again, the same eye. This is the upper eyelid flipped over, and you can see some, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 small petechial hemorrhages there in that eyelid.
.211.
So this is the left side of Ms. Harris's face, and you can see there are, again, a small collection of petechial hemorrhages on the left cheek.
.212.
And this is the left side of Ms. Harris's neck, and again, it's kind of obscured somewhat by lividity. So lividity is the pooling of blood, and so it gives the skin this pink-purple background color, but within that you can see there are some small petechial hemorrhages here within that.
Let's talk about the pooling as you're talking about there. When a body dies, when a person dies and is in a fixed position, what happens to the blood inside their body?
So the blood tends to flow with gravity to the dependent areas of the body. So in general, most of the time people are found on their back, and so the blood will pool on the posterior or back surfaces of their body, and it will impart this red-purple discoloration on the skin.
So Ms. Harris is found on kind of her left side, somewhat faced down. You would find that this pooling is consistent with that.
Correct.
213.
This is a photo of Miss Harris's neck, front of her neck or anterior neck. Again, petechial hemorrhages are present almost on the entire anterior portion of the neck in this photo and upper chest.
Again, anterior to you means front to us.
Correct, front.
State's Exhibit number 214.
So this is slightly lower down, so we're seeing the right side, upper right side of Miss Harris's chest and middle part of her chest. And again, we're seeing large collections of petechial hemorrhages here over her chest.
And that's on her right side.
Correct. That is the photo shows mostly the right side as well as the middle part of her chest.
So if she is laying down on the left side, where the blood would then be pooling down on that side, this is staying on the top side where the gravity is not affecting it.
Correct.
State's Exhibit number 215 is that just another side showing a little bit more of that petechial evidence there on the right breast.
Correct. So this one's just a slightly lower photo showing the petechial hemorrhages on the right side of the chest.
.216.
So this photo is more the left side of Miss Harris's chest, and also captures somewhat of the lower part of the neck. You can see that there's pretty abundant petechial hemorrhaging, yes, upper middle to left side of the chest, as well as the left breast and the left shoulder.
You had mentioned some bruising on the arm, 216.
Correct. So these three, you can kind of see them in a row here. Yes, 1, 2, 3. Dark purple contusion. So contusion is just a fancy word for a bruise on the right wrist.
Okay, so that would be if you look at my end here with it, generally where I've got my fingers.
Yeah. So my description of anterolateral is exactly what you're showing. So the wrist portion, if you extend down from the thumb, that's the portion of the anterolateral wrist with the 3 contusions.
And 218, is that on the back side?
Correct. So this is a photo with the forearm of Miss Harris bent across her body to demonstrate the contusion on the posterior lateral or back part of the wrist. Correct.
I'm pointing right here.
Correct.
Now, you don't know how she got these bruises. She could have had those bruises the day before or whatever, but you note them when you see them.
Absolutely.
So did you make findings based on all the evidence that was presented to you and based on the information that you saw in the autopsy?
Yes, I did.
And what were those findings?
So we list our findings on the last page of the report when I was here in Dallas, and the first finding is typically you reserve the number 1 finding for the cause of death, and so the cause of death in this case is smothering, and I list the supporting documentation found at autopsy to support that.
Okay, and that's basically the petechial hemorrhaging that you saw and the contusions as well.
Correct.
You also list a finding of number 2, hypertensive.
Yes, hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So that's kind of hypertension and coronary artery disease. One of the most common things that people have as they age. She had hypertension and hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease.
But that's not the reason why we're here today. It's because of number 1.
Correct.
And then you also list off number 3, the information that was provided to you.
Yeah, the investigative information, we typically put in the last line the investigative information and how the decedent was found.
So based on the information, you have a conclusion that Lou T. Harris, an 81-year-old female, died as a result of smothering. And did you have a manner of death?
Yes, the manner of death in this case is homicide.
Now, I gave you the hypothetical of a pillow. Did that, let me show you. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 203. It's a pretty standard pillow.
Yes.
If we were to take, State's hypothetically speaking, take this, place it on the body, on the face, nose, and mouth of Ms. Harris, and press it down on there, could this cause the smothering that you're talking about?
Yes.
And will this pillow used in that manner then be a deadly weapon?
Yes, absolutely.
And if, let's say, someone were to use their hands and cause that same type of blockage to the airway or air passages, could the hands be a deadly weapon?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know that the pillow or the hands were used in this case?
I do not know that.
Is there any way scientifically for someone to actually determine the exact object that would have been used to cause this smothering?
No, I don't think with any real accuracy that you could make that determination.
So that information would be unknown or unknowable to a grand jury member who is creating the indictment in this case.
Yes.
But nonetheless, any object other than or in addition to the pillow or hands, they would be deadly weapons in this case.
Certainly.
I'll pass witness.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning, Dr. James. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you.
My name is Jobin Moore, and I represent Mr. Chemirmir in these proceedings. Let's have a few questions for you. I want to start off with you kind of finished up with Mr. Fitzmartin regarding the hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain a little bit more to me in regards to that? I've done a little research on this. It involves plaque in the arteries and things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So when the plaque is built up around or in the arteries, is it specifically around the heart, or where can it be located?
So I believe in this case, it's one of the, they're basically, for a quick anatomy, there's 3 main vessels, blood vessels that feed oxygenated blood to the heart. And in this case, one of those blood vessels had a blockage, a plaque, that I believe was about 50% blocked or stenosed.
And so, and if it's 50% blocked or clogged or whatever term we want to use, that makes it more difficult for the flow of blood to go to and fro. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the mechanism or the muscle that pumps the blood throughout the body is the heart. Is that right?
That's correct.
And would you agree with me, doctor, that the more difficult it is for the heart to pump blood to different areas or through those areas where they're clogged, does it put more strain on the heart?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Causes the heart to work harder?
Yes.
Okay. So now, in relating to the petechia that you spoke of earlier, you stated you did see some on the surface of the heart, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it possible that it could come from the extra pumping of extra effort required by that?
It certainly could. Like I said, it's a non-specific finding.
And I'm glad you brought that up. You keep speaking of the term or using the term non-specific finding. So if you don't have any other additional or external information to assist you, but you do have petechia, then you just, how do you go from there?
If I had zero information and simply what I have at this autopsy, the manner of death would be undetermined. That's essentially a product of the medical legal death investigation. We have to consider any and all investigative information, whether it be from witnesses, law enforcement, whoever else may have been present, to make this determination.
And that's in any autopsy that you do regarding that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Whether there's petechia or if it's something blatant like a gunshot wound, you still take into consideration everything. Is that correct?
Absolutely. A gunshot wound could be a suicide. It could be a homicide. It could be an accident.
Now, just so the jury is clear regarding that external information you may receive from a detective or whatever when you're doing an autopsy and making your findings, the information that you receive does not supersede the medical or the scientific findings. Is that correct?
No, I don't think it would supersede it, no.
Okay. And then the petechia that, or just in general, if you think about petechia, how long typically does petechia stay around?
I believe they stay around for an extended period of time. I don't know exactly how long.
Okay. So, for instance, we heard earlier, and I asked for your agreement, isn't it true, doctor, that petechia can come from other forms of injury or stress to the body? Is that correct?
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be from strangulation, smothering, choking, and things of that nature.
Right. It can be something outside of asphyxia. Correct.
Some examples could you give us some examples?
I mean, there's literature that says, a strong sneeze can produce petechial hemorrhages. Profound coughing fits can produce petechial hemorrhages.
Straining while lifting weights, correct?
Correct.
Vomiting, correct?
Vomiting, correct.
Okay. So there are several other different reasons and causes why petechia may be present in evidence. Is that correct, doctor?
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
So, doctor, if you didn't have the information that at, let's say, 3:27, hypothetically speaking, Miss Harris is alive and well and shopping at Walmart, and then at 5:50 her property is being discarded at 4500 Pier Ridge by an individual, and that they're investigating an attack on a woman in the day before who had a pillow put over her face, and the investigators that led them to this house that found this body. And let's say you didn't know any of that information, and a couple of days later, Miss Harris is found in the state that she's found with these injuries. It might go undetected by the police and by the medical examiner's office in that scenario as a smothering homicide case.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, without that information, as I stated earlier, the manner would be undetermined because there's just not enough information to make an accurate determination. And in asphyxial deaths, as a medical examiner, we rely most heavily, I believe, on the investigative information, no matter where it comes from. But it's a cause of death that requires that kind of information.
And is it also true that in these types of scenarios where you have an individual who's 81 years old, or maybe someone who's 90 years old or older, that if you don't even see the body, okay, let's say it doesn't make it in there, because sometimes when you have elderly individuals who die, you all may not even do an autopsy on that.
That's correct. Most of the time, I believe in Dallas, they wouldn't have even brought them to the medical examiner's office for examination if there's no outward signs of trauma.
And therefore, it would be called a natural death.
Yes, it could be, yes.
Okay, and unless unless this type of information is provided to you, so detailed information that we have in this case, this could have been classified undetermined or maybe even natural.
Correct, and I don't think I stated this earlier, but the cause of death and the manner of death are opinions based on my autopsy findings as well as based on the investigative information. So again, it's my opinion.
I'll pass it.
No question.
May this witness be released?
Yes, sir.
No objection, John.
All right. You are free to go, doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Judge, may we approach?
Yes.
Okay, folks, they'll be breaking for lunch here pretty soon. This is the
All
normal
right,
routine.
ladies and gentlemen, we
Yep,
had
there.
a good breaking point. So if you would please retire to the jury room. I believe we may have lunch available again today, Dallas County. And so at this time, we will recess and we will let you know if we'll be proceeding further today. But right now, we will go ahead and recess.
All right.
I didn't catch her say what time she was having us back, but okay, I'm going to assume maybe it's 1:15ish like she did yesterday, or probably about an hour. But we just heard testimony, Meredith, from the medical examiner, and I think it was really interesting. You know, he was saying that but for the investigative information that they had, that this would have been ruled undetermined. And the defense obviously made a big deal of that. What do you make of it? I'm not hearing her in my ear. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Are we hearing? Story of our lives, guys. Technical difficulty. Ah, battery died. All right, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to wrap this up. And then when we get back, we'll have Meredith kind of talk through it. But so as you folks saw, we wrapped up with the medical examiner's testimony, you know, who described the particular hemorrhages that he found on Lou Harris's body. But he also said, I think it's really important to note that but for the investigative information that this case would have been ruled undetermined, that they would not have been able to reach a conclusion that this was homicide. And I'm guessing what Meredith will say, based on some of the conversation, the back and forth we were having as we were listening to the testimony, is that Mary Bartel's testimony is really important because Mary Bartel describes being smothered with a pillow. And I think also just the fact that he is found with all of Lou Harris's jewelry and other items and these $2 bills, that, you know, it's a very tight timeline between when she is in the Walmart at the same time as he is and when her body is found. And I also want to talk a little bit about the testimony from her son-in-law. I thought that testimony was really compelling. You got a sense of who she is. I honestly didn't know much about her, but to hear that she had come here to this country from Vietnam, that she had a restaurant in Saigon, that she met her husband there, that she fled the country on a helicopter, and that her and her husband lived for decades in, I think they said, Tanzania. I mean, just an amazing life story, and then to know how her life ended, it was really heartbreaking. And the key points I think out of that testimony was we heard, we had the son-in-law identify this property, this green emerald ring, a gold bracelet, a necklace that had the name Kim on it. Kim was the name that she actually went by. And items like that. And of course, he also identified the jewelry box. The jewelry box, he was found throwing away at the time that he's arrested. And then these $2 bills. I know yesterday, as I was watching them show the property that was found in his possession, I was trying to figure out the $2 bills. Thought that was really odd. $2 bills is not something. You might have one. I mean, I haven't had a $2 bill in my possession in years, so I thought it really struck me yesterday, and I couldn't figure out, why was the $2 bills going to be important? Well, now I know. Lou Harris kept $2 bills. She gave $2 bills as gifts to people for their birthdays and that sort of thing. So, really, what you see, I think, is the prosecution. Putting the finishing touches on. Oh, Meredith is back. Okay, Meredith. I just chit-chatted here for a while.
You don't need me.
No, it's all good. So just a couple of questions, and then we'll have lunch ourselves. What did you make of the medical examiner's testimony?
I thought it was very interesting. I thought that when I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, if he said there might not have even been an autopsy if they hadn't suspected that something was really wrong. I mean, they come in there, they see the pillow, they see the lipstick smeared. Do they automatically assume it's a murder, or do they just think, oh, well, she might have had a heart attack or a stroke and fallen over? Without the other pieces of the puzzle, you might just think that that's what happened. It was a, natural death that was just very unfortunate. Had we not had Mary Bartel's testimony about what happened to her, I don't know that we could have necessarily put the pieces together like we have.
Yeah, and I also think that him having Lou Harris's possessions, the $2 bills, and that's one of the things I was talking about as they were trying to fix your mic, is that those $2 bills yesterday, I was trying to figure out what's the deal with the $2 bills that they found in his car, and now we know she gave those away as gifts. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that the defense attorneys did an effective job of raising doubt there?
Yes, I do. I mean, that medical examiner's testimony had a lot of good things for the defense, especially when now the prosecutors have to prove what's in their indictment, the elements of the case, beyond a reasonable doubt. One of the elements in this case is that they have to prove how she died. And so smothering with a pillow by using hands or a deadly weapon, an object unknown to the grand jury. They can put all of those in there, but they have to prove one of those ways that he killed her. And so with the medical examiner's testimony about, well, it could have been smothering, but we just don't know. And scientists and experts don't like to be pinned down on anything. You give them a hypothetical, could it have been this pillow? And he's like, well, I really can't say for sure. But definitely when he says, okay, taken in combined with all the other evidence, we call it the totality of the evidence, I can say, yeah, it's possible that she was smothered, but no one can say for sure. And that's what the defense is going to be able to argue, is that we can't be assured beyond a reasonable doubt that that's exactly how she died. I mean, it could have been an accident, and maybe this guy broke into her house and found her dead and took her stuff and left, and maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But if it's reasonable, then you can have reasonable doubt.
Hey, Tina, what's the question? Oh, okay. Yeah, so somebody on YouTube is asking, will Billy Chemirmir take the stand? Do you think he takes a stand?
I don't see it. From a professional
would
legal
you put him
standpoint.
On the stand?
No, I mean, it just depends. You would think that he would take the stand. Obviously, everybody would want him to take the stand, but there's a million reasons why he shouldn't take the stand. And, it's up to the state to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not up to Billy Chemirmir to prove his innocence. But we all know that, the saying is if I was accused of something I didn't do, wild horses couldn't keep me off that stand. I'd be screaming I was not guilty from the rooftops. So, he only takes the stand if he absolutely has to, that there's something important that he has to say that can't come out through any other witness. But, in a circumstantial case, is he shooting himself in the foot to take the stand? Possibly.
Okay, so Rebecca Lopez is going to call me, and we're going to do a phoner with Rebecca. We can't exactly take her perfectly live, so I am going to put my mic. Okay, we're gonna try this, guys. Let me see. Let me turn her up. Rebecca.
Hey.
Well, you're joining us here on YouTube Nation and live on our website. Talk to us about what you saw today.
Well, before I do that, just real quickly, the judge recessed for today. I don't know if you guys knew that, but there was some sort of scheduling with the prosecutor in his schedule, so they have recessed. So testimony is ending today, and they'll resume trial tomorrow morning at 8:30. So as far as what I saw today, well, right now the families are talking. They have been wanting to get their stories out. So they've been talking every day, and they say they will be here every day of the trial. There's 11 of the 18 families represented here. And what they're wanting is their loved ones' stories to be told, because they know that their cases will never see the light of day. They'll never get to go to trial. Billy Chemirmir will never stand trial for the deaths of their loved ones, and so they're very adamant that they want to be heard during this trial. And obviously, one of the biggest concerns is that they're not inside the jury, they're not inside the courtroom, so the jury can't see them. They can't see the jury, and they really wish that they could be in there so that the jury could understand what the families are going through too. So that's what, they were hoping that they would be able to be inside, but they're in an overflow room here at the courthouse because of COVID protocols. They're not allowed inside the courtroom.
Yeah, and that's an extraordinary thing, and it really is due to COVID. I mean,
yeah, and Tanya, I've covered a lot of trials over the years here in Dallas, and one of the crazy things is, honestly, I think this trial is moving at a really rapid pace compared to other capital murder trials that I have covered. And I think part of that is that there's just so much overwhelming evidence that the prosecutors are presenting. And I don't know if you guys touched on this, but I've kind of been stunned a little bit in that the defense really hasn't had much of a defense. Even in their cross-examination, it's hard for them to cross-examine someone who says, yes, that was my loved one's jewelry, and yes, that jewelry was found in Chemirmir's home. And then the keys, to me, the keys were extraordinary, that they found the keys on Chemirmir, but the keys also unlocked, some of those keys unlocked the door to Lou Harris's house. I really hope that at some point they'll explain how those keys got there.
Yeah, I think those are the things that are really difficult to explain, is the keys, the jewelry, the $2 bills. I mean, how do you explain all that stuff? I mean,
the jewelry box, the letters, just all of the, and then we're going to also hear from the telephone experts. They're going to bring in experts possibly tomorrow that are going to talk about when they do those data dumps, and they're able to look at his phone and see where they pinged. And I remember when this case first broke, I got the search warrants for some of the evidence and where they were serving some of the warrants, and he had like 5 different cell phones, and so they took all that information off of those cell phones and they did a big data dump, and then they started looking to see where those phones pinged and was he in the locations of where some of these 18 victims were, and some of them, that's how they linked him to the crime scene, as they said that his phone pinged sometimes inside the apartment at the time that they believe the victim died, and then obviously they also linked him to the jewelry. At some places it was pawn shops, another it was places where they were selling gold. So I'm assuming that all of that is going to come up here pretty soon. But this is a very strong case for the prosecution.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I'm going to chat for a few more minutes with Meredith. Thanks so much for calling in. I think this actually worked pretty well. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's the best alternative I can come up with, other than having some sort of other feed. And we're still working on the technical issues of how to be able to take Rebecca, actually live on video. But we'll get there. So anyway,
All right.
I appreciate it, Rebecca. Thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Hey, so Meredith, your thoughts on what you heard Rebecca say?
Yeah, I hadn't considered the fact that the family wants the jury also to see them. I think that's an important point, is that the family, even though the jury's not supposed to look into the gallery and see the other, I mean, in normal trials, the jury doesn't even know there are other victims to look at, but just being there to see the jury, to see the people that are possibly going to put away this guy for life, is also a powerful thing, and it's very emotional, and I'm sure the family is very emotional, and it's a big deal for them.
Yeah, like I said, we talked earlier. I can understand the anger and the agitation at wanting your story told and not feeling that you're able to tell your story. But I'm very much looking forward to hearing from the cell phone analysis that shows him at these other places, the stuff that Rebecca was talking about. And I agree that the keys are a big deal.
Yeah, the keys are hard to get around. Nowadays with the cell phone technology, I mean, everyone is convicted by their phone nowadays, it seems. If you want to commit a crime, you better put your phone away, because it's basically tracking you. People talk about vaccines and the trackers and microchips or whatever. Like, you're carrying a microchip with you everywhere you go. It's basically spying on you every single minute of your life.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And that is going to be interesting. And she said he had 5 cell phones, so my mind immediately was like, are they stolen cell phones? Whose cell phones?
Burner cell phones? Why would anybody have 5 cell phones?
Why would you be so smart as to wear gloves and not leave any DNA or fingerprints, but then you have 5 cell phones? It doesn't make sense. And not dump them before the police get to you. But that's how people get caught. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to hear. And that's going to be very dry testimony, but it will be all wrapped up at the end. All these different places and all these different victims.
It's dry, but it's important. It's part of it. I was talking to Judge Conyers yesterday. It's a little bit like, again, you're building a house. Yesterday we built the foundation. Today we're building the first floor. And I'm guessing tomorrow we're going to start putting on the roof.
Yeah, putting the roof on.
And so I think that's where we're headed. Well, guys, court wrapped up at lunchtime. I'm a little bit, again, kind of blown away. Yesterday we wrapped up at 3:20. I don't think I've ever seen court wrap up the way this has been wrapping up, and I do think it has a lot to do with just the lack of questions that is being asked by the defense. And it'll be interesting to see if that's just a strategy or if they just really got nothing. So I don't know. I'm not sure. What do you think, Meredith?
I'll keep my opinions to myself, but I think that you're probably right.
I got nothing?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes
or the do no harm?
What can you say? And like Rebecca said, I mean, what are you going to say? That's not your loved one's jewelry with her name on it? I mean, there's very little they can do, but I think they did well with what they had, with what they made of it what they could, and they got into some areas where they could really poke some questions and poke some holes in the prosecution's case, and sometimes that's all you need. I mean, you just need one juror on your side to, have a not guilty, so.
Okay, so guys, we're going to wrap it up for the day. We will be back tomorrow for day 3 of the Billy Chemirmir trial. We'll be on YouTube. We'll be on WFAA.com. Also, Fire TV and Roku, I think is the other one. And tomorrow we'll have former Judge David Finn will be our guest legal analyst. And so it promises to be an interesting day. So join us tomorrow. Thank you.